I guess the focus of my talk is slightly different compared to the talks we heard so far, in that I'm not really concerned with effort in and of itself, but more in a way in which effort actually plays a role in normative thinking. So what I would like to do is as follows. I want to first talk a little bit about dual character concepts and the role that commitments seem to play when we use dual character concepts. And then want to raise the question of whether it really is commitments actually, or whether it's not rather effort that plays this role. And of course, I need to say a few more things about dual character concepts, which I do in a minute. And then in the third part, I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to ask whether the praiseworthiness of an agent that is down to effort can actually be compensated by certain opportunity costs, something that has been suggested by Maslin and colleagues. All right, so let's get started with the first part. So I guess it's fair to say that most studies of human concepts focus on natural kind concepts and artifact concepts. But at least recently, during the last few years, more attention is now devoted to concepts of social roles, like, for example, welder, nurse, and scientist. And because they have a certain ontological uniqueness, we can expect that those concepts also have a certain unique structure. And in fact, about, well, 7, 8, 9 years ago, Knope and colleagues proposed that there is a certain class of dual character concepts. And many of these social role concepts show certain patterns that make them dual character concepts. So what are dual character concepts? Well, basically, dual character concepts allow categorization in terms of concrete features on the one hand, so descriptive features, but also an independent categorization in terms of a normative dimension. So if we take the example of an artist, I might think of Jane as an artist because she satisfies certain concrete features like earning a living by painting paintings or sculpturing. But also I might think of her as an artist because she satisfies something normative, like being committed to a certain function that an artist might satisfy. I will give another example in a second. And one of the linguistic ways in which we can seem to highlight this normative dimension is by true. For example, talking about someone as a true artist or as a true father. So let me just give you another example. So suppose John has 2 biological children, but he doesn't care very much about them and leaves his family after a few years. Now, if you give participants the A and B sentence, they by and large agree with the statement. So there is a sense in which John is clearly a father. However, if you think about what it really means to be a father, you would have to say that John is not a father after all. So you are willing to say that the term father applies to him in one sense, but not in another. And now consider Mark, who is John's brother. He has no biological children of his own, but he takes care of John's children and makes sure they have everything they need. Now, again, if you look at sentence A and B, there's a sense in which Mark is clearly not a father. However, if you think about what it really means to be a father, you would have to say that Mark is a father after all. People quite strongly actually agreed to both statements. So this example also shows the double dissociation that you can have here. So people can, of course, fulfill both the normative and the descriptive dimension, but a person might satisfy only one of the 2 dimensions, either the descriptive or the normative. And I think that the acceptability can actually be even pushed further up by highlighting that it is this kind of this true artist, true father that is at stake here. So many social role concepts have been argued to be dual character, also certain gender terms, so mechanic, scientist, woman, boy. And more recently, some scholars have argued that some of philosophy's most central concepts actually turn out to be dual character, like art, belief, happiness, and self. But of course, not all of them, and also not all social role terms show this kind of pattern. So for example, bus driver and welder don't seem to allow for this kind of dual character pattern. So I think that so far the dual character concept framework has not been, very widespread. Most philosophers and psychologists focus on thick concepts as probably the most interesting class of normative concepts that they investigate. So courageous is, for example, one of these kind of thick concepts. And thick concepts also have a descriptive and a normative aspect. So if I say that Sarah is courageous, I also say something descriptively about her, for example, that she's willing to take risks. And I also say something normative about her, or evaluative, that this is good about her and that she should behave in that way. But thick concepts are different from dual character concepts. So let me just highlight two aspects here. So while it's difficult to communicate that Sarah is courageous, but say that I actually don't want to evaluate her positively by doing that, when it comes to dual character concepts, they don't carry this kind of evaluative valence on their sleeve. So I can say, of course, that Sarah is a woman or Sarah is a scientist without you being able to infer anything about how I think about her more positively or more negatively. And secondly, what you have for dual character concepts, namely this double dissociation aspect that a person can fulfill only one of the two senses, that is not the case with thick concepts. So although they have this kind of descriptive and normative dimension, it's, for example, not possible to satisfy just the normative dimension, but not the descriptive dimension. So what is this normative dimension of dual character concepts? And here there are several proposals on the table. Let me just talk about two. So in their 2013 paper, Nobe and colleagues argue that it is certain associated abstract values. So a true artist would be a person, not a person who earns their living by painting pictures. That would be the descriptive side. The normative side, the true artist, is the person who creates work of deep aesthetic value, where there's kind of a certain associated abstract value. And with my colleague, Guillermo del Pinal, we propose a different account. We argue that it's actually not certain associated abstract values, but what is central for satisfying that normative dimension is a certain commitment. So a commitment to, more specifically, to the basic function of that social role. So a true artist then would be not a person who creates work of deep aesthetic value or who creates original art, but a person who's committed to that basic function of the social role. So that is the hypothesis that we put forward. So the normative dimension of these kind of dual character concepts, especially when it comes to social role concepts, represents the commitment to the basic function associated with the social role. And there are certain testable claims that this proposal has, of course. So two testable claims that we actually followed on with some experiments is that true ratings. So one of the ways that people try to operationalize or try to measure the kind of the normative dimension, or at least the intensity of the normative dimension, is by looking at acceptability of true statements. So like, for example, Max is a true artist, Janice is a true athlete. And these ratings should correlate with the level of commitment that people ascribe to these people fulfilling a certain social role. And secondly, if you start to manipulate people's commitment, that should then have an effect on the acceptability of these kind of true modifications. So here's the result from the first study that we've done. So one group of people actually rated how, so the question was, how surprised would you be to find out that a certain artist was not committed to the basic function of that social role. We also looked at ratings for skill. So how surprised would you be if that person is not very skilled? And another group of people basically answered questions about these acceptability of these true ratings. So Janice is a true artist and so on. And what we found is that there's a nice correlation between ascriptions of commitments with ascriptions of high ratings for acceptability of true statements. And we didn't find any correlation for skill. In the second study, the contextual information study, what we've done is we basically had 3 different conditions. So we had a no context condition or a baseline condition in which we basically just asked people, please rate on a scale from 1 to 7. 1 meaning sounds weird, 7 sounds natural. For 18 different social role concepts, Jack is a true artist, Jack is a true welder, Jack is a true mechanic, Jane is a true scientist, and so on. And then we had 2 other conditions, a high function condition, where we specified that the person is really skilled and highly efficient at his job, and then a high devotion context. So that was the commitment condition. He really likes his job and is completely devoted to it. And what we find here, so let me first direct your attention to the right-hand side, to the what we call weak dual character concept. So based on some preliminary studies, we divide these 18 social role concepts and those that have a rather small normative dimension and those that have a very strong normative dimension. And as you can see, so the high devotion context makes claims like true artist, true scientist much more acceptable than the baseline and the high function context. For those strong DCCs, so those DCCs like artists and scientists, for example, who already have a strong normative dimension, you don't actually see an extra effect because people expect artists and scientists to be committed to, for example, creating original art or doing unbiased research. But the high function condition shows that then the ratings actually drop. So again, it seems that commitments seem to be central for this normative dimension. So before I get on to the second part, let me just say 2 more things about this. So we believe that the commitment proposal is not only more descriptively adequate, but also gives a nice explanation. So imagine you have Jenny, who is 15 years old and who plays lots of piano, right? And you want to make a certain prediction about how she behaves in the future. Then having information about her skill level, of course, gives you some indication of how she might progress and what she might do in the future. But knowing about her commitment seems to be actually sometimes or very often even better in making accurate predictions, because a person who's very committed to the basic function of a social role might more strongly stick to what she's doing compared to the person who's quite skilled about something, but actually is not very committed to that social role. And the second aspect I wanted to just throw out there is more on the side, is that this kind of operationalization with true ratings allows you to look also at how people think about commitment for different social roles. So what we've done here is we looked at neutral social roles, male-associated social roles like welder and mechanic, and female-associated social roles like florist and nurse. And perhaps not surprisingly, what we find is that for male-associated roles, people are more happier to say that, for example, Jack is a true welder or Jack is a true mechanic sounds more natural than Jenny is a true mechanic or Jenny is a true welder. But we don't find the opposite pattern for female-associated roles. So this is quite surprising and might reveal some kind of gender bias that we might have in terms of commitment regarding people in female and male-associated social roles. So there was no effect for the neutral social roles. Right. So so far we've just proposed that this is all about commitment. So commitment is central. But you might think that, well, what does it really mean to be committed to a certain basic function of a social role? That's still rather vague. And one might think that an important role is actually played by the effort that people put in to achieve a certain valuable end. So it is not commitment per se, but actually it's rather effort that is central. So here's a nice quote by Maslin, Savulescu, and Hunt from a recent article, 2020. So they say praiseworthy commitment involves considerable opportunity costs incurred by investing time, energy, well-being, and other limited resources, as well as explicit priority setting by the agent. Effort is another such cost and is often a good proxy for the strength of this commitment. So, as I say, perhaps it is effort that plays the crucial role. And of course, there can be effortless commitment and there can be effortful commitment. And perhaps it's rather effortful commitment that makes a big difference for normative thinking and for praiseworthiness of agents. They then say, however, that it is the choice and costly commitment to pursue a valuable achievement that is fundamentally praiseworthy. So actually, they consider effort to be perhaps one important factor, but not the crucial factor. So they have more the praiseworthiness of an agent in mind. With the dual character concepts in our proposal, we have more this kind of what makes it the case that a person satisfies this normative dimension in mind. But at the same time, both of these proposals are that, well, it could be effort that is central, but maybe it is actually not. Maybe effort is just one aspect and it doesn't really matter. The most important part is that you're committed to pursue a valuable achievement. Right, so in order to find out whether commitment is the key or whether effort is actually central, I conducted the following study. So that is study 1. And so this study is, and also, so both study 1 and study 2 just look at 2 social role concepts, namely the social role concept artist and athlete. And of course, I'm aware that this makes the possible conclusion of these studies quite limited. So it might, of course, be that what we find for artist and athlete is not generalizable to other social role concepts. And we actually also see that there's some interesting difference between the social role concepts. Nonetheless, I wanted to look at these particular examples, or because, well, on the one hand, artist is the pet example in the dual character concept literature. Many articles look primarily at artist and scientist. And the second one, athlete, is the concept that features largely in Maslin's paper. And as this becomes more and more important for the second and third part of this talk, I wanted to include this concept as well. So here are the 2 conditions. Basically, I had an effortful commitment condition and an effortless commitment condition. Let me just read that out to you. So the vignette I gave to participants was, Janice is an artist. She's committed to and likes creating paintings that are original. So here specifying that she has this general commitment. Because she finds it easy to go through the long hours that creating original paintings entails. The other condition was because she finds it hard. And then she does not need to put in a great amount of effort, or if it was specified that it is hard for her, she needs to put in a great amount of effort each day to keep herself focused, motivated, and productive. So again, effortful condition and effortless commitment condition. And then I asked participants 2 different questions. The first one was more with a focus on the normative dimension of dual character concepts. Please tell us whether you agree or disagree with the following statement: Janice is a true artist. And the second one was, please tell us how praiseworthy you consider Janice to be for creating original paintings. Now, I gave each participant both questions, and they were basically randomly assigned to one of the 2 conditions, and then randomly first received either the praiseworthy and then the 2 questions, or vice versa. And because there was a small order effect, I couldn't collapse the data. So what you now see, the results are only the results that people from people who answered the first question. So this is the athlete vignette. I just quickly read it out. John is an athlete. He's committed to achieving the best possible results because he finds it easy or hard to exercise many hours each day to achieve the best possible results. He does not need to or needs to put in a great amount of effort each day to keep himself focused and motivated. So here are the results. So we had 281 participants randomly assigned to one of the 8 conditions. And let's focus on the 2 bars on the left first. So these are the true ratings. So when people got the effortless or the effortful condition, they rated Janice as a true artist very highly. And quite surprisingly to me, at least, there was no difference whether the person actually had to make an effort to achieve the valuable end, namely the creation of original paintings, or whether she actually had to put in a lot of effort for the creation of these paintings. And if we look at the praiseworthiness ratings, for artists, so that's on the right-hand side, the first two bars, you see that this is also nicely reflected in terms of praiseworthiness ratings. So people do not consider Janice as an artist more praiseworthy if she puts in more effort in creating these products. I did run a pilot study before I ran this bigger study, in which I also asked people to explain their answers, and the answers were quite satisfying in that people seemed to really explain their high ratings by saying that, yeah, but she is committed to doing this to creating original paintings, so it doesn't really matter how much effort she puts into it. So that was quite revealing in the sense that people seemed to get at what I was actually hoping to examine. The results look slightly different for athletes. So here there was a significant difference, although it was just marginally significant, between the effortless and the effortful conditions. So it did actually matter whether John the athlete puts in effort into the training compared to the athlete who finds it very easy to do the long training sessions. Again, this was also reflected by the praiseworthiness ratings. Again, a marginally significant effect here. So what can we conclude from that? So as I say, I don't want to make very general conclusions in regards to all social role concepts, especially also because we find some differences here between artist and athlete. But I think that what is still quite interesting to see is that the commitment to the basic function for artists is sufficient for satisfying the normative dimension. So regardless of the amount of effort a person puts in. And for athlete, the effort seems to make a contribution, although it is pretty small, to whether the normative dimension of a social role concept athlete is satisfied. And also what we see is quite a nice correlation between these kind of true ratings and how praiseworthy people consider a certain person to be. Right, so in the last part of my talk, I want to look at whether in regards to the praiseworthiness of an agent that is down to effort, whether this can actually be compensated by opportunity costs. Now you might think, well, haven't you just shown that effort doesn't play this large role? So why do you investigate now whether effort can be compensated by opportunity costs? And the reason is, what we have seen is only that a person who doesn't need to put in a lot of effort, there it doesn't play a large role how whether we consider that the agent praiseworthy or not. What I haven't shown, and what is still up for grabs, is the question of, for those who need to put in effort, right? Does it matter that they actually then put in the effort, or are they allowed to compensate this effort, for example, through motivational enhancers, and basically take a shortcut to achieve the same valuable end? So here are again, I read out already the first quote. Let me just say a little bit more about the position here that is put forward by Maslin and colleagues. So they say effort is just one cost amongst many, and costs of activities can be traded off. Motivational enhancement reduces the praise due to an agent only when it reduces the net cost to the agent. And motivational enhancement then can reduce, maintain, or increase an agent's praiseworthiness for achieving a valuable end, depending on the way in which the enhancement affects the overall costliness and strength of the agent's commitment. So the position is basically that the praiseworthiness that is down to effort can actually be traded off by other opportunity costs. And what they particularly look at in this paper is what happens when athletes take motivational enhancers. Do we consider people less praiseworthy or not for going through this training sessions and achieving a certain valuable end? Now I should say, so I also wanted to look at this, and this is now a study 2 that I want to present. I should say that while the Maslin paper is really very rich and very clear, there's one thing that I was quite unhappy about, which is they seem to oscillate quite regularly between making a normative claim and a descriptive claim. So at times it seems to they seem to suggest only that we should praise agents just as much for what they basically do in producing a valuable end, even if they don't put in an effort and by ensuing some other opportunity costs. At other times, they say, this is what we intuitively think about these cases. So just as a caveat, keep that in mind. Right, so here's the study 2. And again, I looked at artist and athlete as my 2 concepts on the investigation. So for this study, I had 3 conditions. A condition A, the effort condition, a condition B, stimulus without side effect, and then stimulants with side effect. The first part was the same for all 3 conditions. Again, I read it out to you. So Janice is an artist. She's committed to and likes creating paintings that are original because she finds it hard to go through the long hours of creating original paintings that creating original paintings entails. She can either put in a great amount of effort to keep herself focused and motivated, or she can take, sorry, I've just blocked my own screen. She can take stimulants that enhance her motivation and endurance. These stimulants have no side effects. Sorry, so the first, so this was the what people in condition A and condition B got. And then if you were randomly assigned to condition A, you get every day, Janice does not take any stimulants, thus creating the paintings often requires a lot of effort. In condition B, the stimulants without the side effect, people read, almost every day Janice takes some stimulants, thus creating the paintings usually does not require a great amount of effort. So I don't think that it is very controversial that we will expect people here to rate Janice more praiseworthy in condition A than in condition B. And that is also something that Maslin and colleagues propose. However, they say now in the condition C, they propose that Janice is just as praiseworthy, although, or at least it increases the praiseworthiness, although she takes a shortcut. So let me just read it out to you again. So the first part is the same, but then instead of saying these stimulants have no side effects, the vignette reads, these stimulants have one side effect. They make her very tired in the evenings. They make her very tired in the evenings so that she often cannot spend the evenings the way she would like. And then almost every day, Janice takes some stimulants, thus creating the paintings usually does not require a great amount of effort, but the pills make her often very tired in the evenings. So here, Maslin and colleagues think that the agent is praiseworthy for pursuing this valuable end of creating original paintings. They, as I say, focus a little bit more on the athlete case. It's basically analogous, so I'm not going through the vignettes now here, but please feel free to ask questions in Q&A if you want to know more about the wording here. Before I present the results, there's one important thing. So they say only that it increases the praiseworthiness if, of course, the overall costliness is increased again. So what I need to show, or what I need to investigate is how costly do people actually consider the extra effort that people put in compared to the side effects. So I did ask people to rate the costliness, both of A, the extra effort that Janice puts into creating the original paintings, or John in the athlete case, and B, the side effect of being very tired in the evening due to taking the stimulants. Right, so here are the results of the second study. So let's focus on the first 2 bars on the left first. So not surprisingly, in the effort condition, people consider Janice to be highly praiseworthy. Same with John, right? So if we look at the athlete case, 5.97, John is considered highly praiseworthy for making the effort. Also, not very surprisingly, we get a dip in the ratings in the condition B. There are no side effects. The person takes the shortcut of taking the motivational enhancer, and therefore it's much easier to go through the training sessions. And people do not consider Janice and John to be as praiseworthy. The drop is much stronger in the athlete case, again, reflecting something that we saw in study 1 as well. But now the crucial condition for investigating the third, or for investigating Maslin's hypothesis was, well, what happens actually if there is a side effect? So if there are opportunity costs. And what we see is that you don't get higher praiseworthy ratings for the agent in condition C. So the difference actually between B and C for the artist case was not significant, and there was no difference either with athlete. I think I just skipped the true results for reasons of time, but we can talk about them as well. They show a very similar pattern, actually. Just before I close, of course, this conclusion in regards to the idea that an agent can be just as praiseworthy, or at least more praiseworthy again, if there are certain costly costs, so certain opportunity costs. That, of course, only holds if we can show that really the side effect is at least at the same level, or maybe even outweighs the extra effort. And as you can see here on the right-hand side, people do consider the cost of the side effect to be actually higher than the extra effort that they think that Janice or John would need to put in. So this nicely then allows us to make that conclusion in regards to the hypothesis that they put forward. Now, I'm aware that there are possibly quite some confounding factors here in this study. So I haven't ruled out all sorts of factors that might influence people's thinking. What I want to say, though, about this is that this was kind of a first batch of studies that I run, so I'm happy for you to make suggestions on how to improve on them, and to maybe control for other factors that I haven't controlled for. I have I try to, with the athlete case in particular, have tried to focus quite strongly on the suggestions that Maslin, Savulescu, and Hunt make in their proposal. So to basically not change the scenario that they consider to be quite intuitive. But of course, they might come back with some objections in regards to the study that I've conducted. Okay, so let me just conclude then. So in the first part, I've argued that previous studies suggest that dual character concepts are a class of normative concepts. The class of dual character concepts is a class of normative concepts that have an independent normative dimension, encoding commitments to the basic function of the social role. Now, in regards to whether they need to be effortful, these kind of commitments, or effortless, it seems that, at least in the situation in which a person is perhaps just has the luck of not needing to put a lot of effort because it comes easy to the person, it doesn't actually matter a lot for whether we consider a person to fulfill that normative dimension. So if you are a person who's lucky enough to not needing to put in a lot of effort into achieving a certain valuable end, good for you, and you will probably be rated quite high on whether you are a true scientist, true philosopher, true psychologist, and what have you. And in regards to the third claim, the third part, I argued that Page, Maslin, and colleagues' effort cannot be easily compensated by other opportunity costs. So trading effort with motivation enhancer plus negative side effect significantly decreases praiseworthiness. And that's it. Thank you very much.